She spotted him before the piano found its tune. A man in a black coat, face turned a little from the light. Rain clung to the brim of his hat. The town of Ashmesa held its breath. So did she. Maeve Calder did not drink whiskey. Tonight she held the glass as if it were a loaded truth. The saloon smelled of wet leather and old smoke. Cards slapped. Boots rasped the floor. Her heartbeat kept a slower count than the room. She had sworn to kill the man named Silas Hart. She had said the words over a grave that wind kept trying to erase. Yet her palm warmed around the glass and wondered how his hand would feel. He ordered nothing. He watched the mirror instead. The big back bar mirror threw the room into a dim river. She saw herself beside him in that river, brown hair pulled tight, jaw set, eyes that had learned how not to blink. The first time she had said his name, it had been a curse. Silas Hart. Cattle thief, gunman, rider of lonely roads. The wanted posters called him a dozen things. Her father called him the reason her brother did not come home. Ashmesa repeated that rumor because it needed a story to explain its grief. Maeve had carried that story like a knife inside her coat. Now he was here. Flesh, shadow, a man with a tired mouth and hands that did not tremble. He slipped his hat off. Rain threaded down the crown and fell to the floor. When he lifted his head, she saw a scar near his left eye. Thin, silver, like the mark of a winter branch. He looked at her then. Not long, not wide. Just a look that landed and stayed. She lowered her gaze first. She hated that she did. The piano player broke into a riverboat tune. Laughter ran with it. A woman with red feathers on her dress leaned near Silas and sold a smile. He gave her a small apology and turned away. That was the first wrong note. Outlaws did not apologize. Outlaws did not look weary of their own legend. Maeve took a step and felt the floor answer. She walked toward him. The air pressed close, as if the whole room leaned in to listen. He saw her coming. He kept still. "Silas Hart," she said. The name steadied her. She liked the feel of it. A boot on a rail. A bridge crossed. He did not reach for the gun at his hip. He only touched the brim of his hat, now resting on the bar. "Miss—" "You know me," she said. It came out almost curious. "Maeve Calder," he said. "Ranch to the south. Good horses, mean fences." Her mouth tilted. "You sent men through those fences." He glanced at the mirror again, as if truth could be found there. "I sent no one." But then she whispered. The thought rose, quick as wind under a door. What if he was not the storm she had chased? What if he was a man trying to outrun another? "Your brother," he said. The word softened in his voice. "I did not put him in the ground." The room kept talking. Cards kept slapping. The piano rattled like hail, yet it all slid away from the space between them. In that space stood grief and the ache of something else. The ache had surprised her all week, ever since she had heard he might ride north. She had dreamed of the desert road and a figure there, and it had not been hate that woke her. It had been heat. "What do you want, then?" she asked. "If it is not more trouble." "Water," he said, almost smiling. "And to leave on a good horse." She wanted to smile back. Resentment stopped it. "You do not get to leave. Not before I know what you did on June the 3rd. His eyes moved to her face and stayed. "I buried a boy that day. He had no one to speak his name. I said it for him. Jonah." "I did not know your brother's name then?" Anger shot through her like a spark in dry brush. "Do not speak of Jonah as if you have the right." "I am speaking of another Jonah," he said. "A Mustang runner. Found him in a wash. Rain had come hard. He had a letter in his pocket. The ink was ruined. I sat with him anyway. Sometimes a soul needs a witness." His voice was not pretty. It was worn and low. It had a steady grain, like a post that had stood in storms and still held the gate. Maeve had not heard a voice like that in a long while. It was a sound that could put a hurt horse at ease. It was a sound that made her throat tight. "You expect me to believe you have a soft heart," she said. "No," he said. "I expect you to believe the rain comes when it wants." Behind them, 2 cowhands argued over the pot. A chair scraped. The red feather woman sang a line and let it fall. The night smelled of wet wool. Outside, thunder walked along the ridge. Maeve set her glass down. "You were seen near our north fence. You rode with a man called Briggs." Silas's mouth flattened at the name. "Briggs rides with himself. He uses other men like shade he can step into. He is why I am here." She had not expected that. "To find him. To stop him," he said, "before he makes more ghosts." Her hand found the bar. The wood was scarred with the stories of years. She could not see her father's face, but she felt his old warnings. A quiet man can sell you the darkest lie. Trust the trail, not the tongue. What he didn't know was... The thought came in on a hush. She had followed Briggs once without knowing it. A grey horse, a rag of blue at the saddle horn. She had seen that colour again this morning, tied to a post behind the freight office. "You want me to help you," she said. The idea shocked her by how right it felt in her bones. "I want you to stay clear," he said. "If I take Briggs, his friends will scatter. If I miss, they will not. They will look for a target that will hurt me. You are standing where the lightning is likely to strike." The words struck her anyway, but not with fear, with a strange sense of being named. He was saying she mattered. He was saying the storm could find her because she was bright. "Tell me what you know," she said. "All of it. Then I will decide where I stand." He studied her as if weighing the cost of truth. He nodded once. He spoke of a freight schedule that had changed, of a ranch hand who drank too fast when he lied, of 2 riders seen near the dry wash above her south pasture. He spoke of a girl in town who had gone missing for a night and returned with a silence in her face. He spoke of footprints that turned inward, as if the men had circled back to make a point. While he talked, Maeve felt a shift inside her. Hate had been a sharp blade. This was a slow fire. It did not burn her up. It warmed the places the wind had taken. In the warmth, she remembered her brother's laugh. She remembered how he had pried open a jammed gate with patience instead of strength. Healing came in like a shy animal, not trusting itself, but curious. Silas fell quiet. He lifted the hat and set it on his head. "I will leave before the hour turns," he said. "The road will be soft with the rain. Good for tracks. Bad for men who need speed. Maeve touched his sleeve. She could not help it. The fabric held the night's cool. His arm beneath it was solid. The touch ran up her hand and into her chest. He held still, respectful, and that steadied her more than any promise could. "You will not ride alone," she said. He searched her face. "You trust me now?" "No," she said. "I trust the road that brought us to this moment. I trust what I have felt since you looked at me and did not flinch." A small light moved in his eyes. Not victory, recognition. "If this has warmed a quiet corner in you," the voice in her heart said, slow and sure, "stay near the fire. Night still carries more to tell." Maeve turned to the door. The rain had eased. The world smelled clean and wild. She took a breath that reached the bottom of her. Behind her, Silas paid for nothing and still left something behind. A steadiness, a choice. They stepped into the street. The road shone like a dark ribbon under the lamps. Far off, thunder rolled away into the hills. Maeve set her hat and tightened the strap on her coat. The next part of the night waited, quiet and wide, and it felt like a hand opening. The rain had thinned to a whisper by the time they reached the edge of town. A single lantern burned outside the freight office, its glass fogged by the night's breath. Horses shifted in the mud, restless from the storm. Maeve's boots sank a little with each step. Silas walked beside her, his presence like a shadow that had learned to keep its distance. She could feel his warmth even through the chill air, the kind that asked nothing but still reached her. "You sure Briggs is still here?" she asked, her hand brushing the colt at her hip. "He leaves marks," Silas said. "He thinks the world's too slow to notice. But the earth keeps the story if you know how to read it." His voice was calm, steady, as if he'd walked this kind of danger 100 times before. She hated how safe it made her feel. She wasn't supposed to feel safe near him. She was supposed to be watching for the moment his lies showed through. The freight yard stretched empty and quiet. Wet crates stacked high, a wagon half-loaded, the smell of hay and rain-soaked leather. The moon slid from the clouds, painting the ground silver. Silas crouched near the tracks, fingers brushing the mud. 2 horses, one heavier. They came through after sunset. Maeve knelt beside him. "Can you tell where they went?" He nodded toward the ridge. "North Road, but slow. They're dragging something heavy. Something or someone." He looked at her. "That depends on what Briggs needed tonight." The wind lifted her hair, sent it across her cheek. Silas reached out before he could stop himself and brushed it back. The touch was light, almost nothing, but her breath caught all the same. She stood too fast. "Don't," she said, sharper than she meant. He lowered his hand. "Wasn't thinking." "That's what gets men killed." He smiled a little. "Sometimes it's what keeps them human." She turned away, angry at the way her pulse raced. She didn't want softness between them. She wanted truth. The kind that hurt. The kind that ended this strange ache building inside her. They followed the tracks out of town. The road rose through sage and rock, the kind of country that kept secrets. The sky above was wide and bruised, lightning still whispering along the horizon. Maeve walked ahead now, lanterns swinging in her hand. "You said Briggs rides alone. Why would he drag a man?" "Because he's sending a message," Silas said. "He wants someone to see what happens when they cross him." Someone like you. Someone like both of us. She stopped. You think I'm part of this? He met her eyes, steady and quiet. You hunted him same as I did. That puts you in his story, whether you meant to be or not. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the wind moved between them, carrying the scent of rain and iron. Maeve thought of her brother again, the day they'd buried him under a sky just like this one. She'd sworn revenge then, sworn she'd make the man who took him pay. Now she wasn't sure she'd found the right man, or the right kind of vengeance. Silas stepped closer. You don't have to walk this with me. I already started. You could still turn back. She shook her head. If I turn back now, I'll never know what's real. A sound cut through the dark, a soft whinny, then the creak of leather. Silas raised a hand, silent. They slipped behind a boulder just as two riders appeared on the ridge. One carried a lantern, the other dragged something slumped over his saddle horn. Maeve's chest tightened. Is that alive? Silas said, low. I can tell by the way the horse moves. They watched as the riders stopped near a dry creek bed. The man with the lantern jumped down, cursing. His voice carried in the still night. Briggs, Silas whispered. Maeve felt the old rage rise up, hot, sharp, clean. The face she'd hunted for years was there, painted in moonlight. The man who'd stolen her peace. She could have fired from where she stood and ended it. But Silas's hand caught her wrist. Not yet. She turned on him, furious. You said you wanted him stopped. I said I wanted him caught, he said, eyes hard now. If you shoot him, his men scatter, and we never learn what they took. Her breath came fast. You think I care what they took? You will, he said, because it's not gold, it's not cattle. He looked down at the limp shape draped over the horse. It's someone still breathing. Maeve's throat went dry. Who? We find out when they move, he said. And when they do, we follow. She stared at him, torn between fury and something she didn't have a name for. Trust, maybe, or the ghost of it. The riders moved again, heading west toward the canyon. Silas and Maeve followed, keeping low among the rocks. The moon slipped behind clouds, leaving the world in shades of grey. Maeve stumbled once, caught herself on Silas's arm. His hand closed around hers to steady her. For a moment everything else fell away. The horses, the wind, even the danger. There was only the quiet between their breaths. He didn't let go right away. Neither did she. Then he said softly, You carry more than one kind of fire, Maeve Calder. She wanted to tell him to shut up. She wanted to tell him he was right. But before she could, a gunshot split the air. The horses below screamed and bolted. Briggs shouted something lost in the echo. Silas pulled her down behind the rock, his body shielding hers. They saw someone, he said. Us? Maybe, or maybe whoever's been following me since last winter. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She could feel his breath near her neck, steady, even as chaos erupted below. Stay here, he said. If I don't come back, you're not going without me, she said. He met her eyes. Rain and lightning flashed there both. You really don't listen, do you? She smiled, despite the fear. Not to men who think they can leave me behind. He almost laughed. Almost. Then he turned, gun drawn, moving like shadow through the rock. Maeve followed 2 steps behind, her heart loud, her promise louder. If this night had already tied her fate to his, so be it. She'd sworn to kill him. She'd sworn it under a dying sun. But now, under this broken moon, she only knew one thing. She could not let him die. The canyon wind rose, carrying the smell of gunpowder and rain. What waited ahead would change more than either of them dared to admit. Gunfire cracked across the canyon, echoing off the stone walls like thunder that refused to die. Maeve pressed her back against the rock and counted the shots. 3, 4, 5. Then silence, sharp and waiting. Silas crouched near the edge, his hat low, eyes narrowed into the dark. "They've scattered," he murmured. "Briggs'll circle back. He always does." Maeve glanced down at the creek bed. The lantern lay tipped in the mud, its flame half dead but stubborn. The body that had been slung over the horse was gone. Only the drag marks remained. "Someone took the prisoner," she whispered, "or the prisoner took themselves." The thought unsettled her. "You think whoever it was could walk away after that ride?" "I've seen folks crawl farther with less reason," he said. "Pain don't weigh much when the will's strong." He started down the slope. Maeve followed, boots sliding on the wet stone. She gripped her revolver tighter, though she wasn't sure if she meant to use it on Briggs or on the ghosts that kept her company. The smell of gunpowder hung low in the air. A coyote yipped somewhere far off, the only witness to what had just happened. When they reached the creek bed, Silas knelt by the tracks. "Small boots," he said, "not a man's. Could be a woman or a youth. Walking slow, but steady." Maeve's brows knit. Briggs was dragging a woman? Looks that way. Her stomach turned. What kind of man drags a woman through a storm? "The kind who wants the world to see what he owns," Silas said. "That's Briggs." He looked up then, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was something raw in his eyes. Not anger, not hate, but memory. "You knew him," she said quietly. He didn't answer right away. "Once," he said, "before I knew better, before I learned what happens when a man mistakes loyalty for mercy." "What did he do?" "Left a trail of graves," he said. "Oh, and made me dig one of them." She didn't ask whose. The way his voice broke at the edge told her enough. They followed the tracks deeper into the canyon. The moon slipped free again, throwing silver light across the stone. Water whispered along the rocks, still swollen from the rain. Every sound felt close enough to touch. Maeve's shoulder brushed Silas's arm. He didn't move away. Neither did she. There was comfort in the closeness, not the kind that promises safety, but the kind that says you're not alone in this dark. Ahead, something glimmered. A small scrap of blue fabric caught on a thorn bush. Maeve reached for it, the fabric damp and torn. "That's Briggs's colour," Silas said. "He marks what's his." Her fingers tightened around the cloth. "Then he's close. Too close." A shadow moved near the rocks ahead, fast, silent. Silas shoved Maeve down just as a bullet snapped through the air above them, biting into stone. They hit the ground hard. She tasted dust, felt his weight cover her for an instant, warm and heavy, before he rolled off, returning fire. The shot that answered came from high on the ridge. Briggs's voice followed, smooth as oil and twice as slick. "Silas Hart," he called. Didn't figure you'd bring company to your funeral. Maeve raised her revolver, aiming toward the voice. You see him? Silas shook his head. He's toying with us. Another bullet sparked off the rock near her boot. She ducked, heart hammering. He's not playing nice. He never does. Silas's tone was flat, cold. He motioned for her to move left. She nodded, crawling low across the rocks. The air smelled of wet dust and blood. Another shot rang out, closer this time. She fired back, the recoil stinging her wrist. Silas moved like a man who had danced with death before, not rushing, not panicking, just flowing where instinct led him. He fired once, twice, and then the canyon went still again. Maeve's breath came fast. You hit him? Doubt it, Silas said, scanning the shadows. He doesn't die easy. A sound drifted from up the trail, a cry, faint but real. It wasn't Briggs. It was softer, frightened. The prisoner, Maeve said. They followed the sound until the canyon widened into a clearing of stone. There, huddled beneath an overhang, was a girl no older than 16. Her wrists were raw, rope still hanging loose around them. Her face was streaked with mud and tears. Maeve knelt beside her, voice gentle. You're safe now, honey. The girl flinched, eyes wide. He said he'd come back, said he'd finish it. Not tonight, Silas said quietly. Maeve cut the rope with her knife. The girl's hands trembled as she rubbed her wrists. He said I was bait, that the man who killed my pa would come for me. Maeve froze. Who was your pa? The girl's voice broke. Jonah Calder. The world tilted. Maeve's knees nearly gave. No, she whispered. That's not possible. Silas's gaze met hers, shock, pain, and a kind of haunted knowing. The girl looked between them, confused. He said Silas Hart shot my pa down by the north fence. Maeve's voice barely found breath. That was my brother. The girl blinked. Then you're... Maeve nodded. Maeve Calder. Silas stepped back, jaw tight. The air between them thickened with old lies and fresh truth. Maeve turned to him, her voice trembling but steady. You told me you didn't kill him. I didn't, Silas said. But Briggs wants you to think I did. He's been weaving this for years. The girl sobbed quietly, her small shoulders shaking. He said if you found me, I'd bring you both to him. Maeve's stomach twisted. He's hunting us. Silas nodded grimly. And now he knows we're together. Thunder rumbled again, low and distant. The storm had passed, but the night was far from over. Maeve looked at Silas, the man she'd sworn to kill, the man she now wasn't sure she could live without. We take her somewhere safe, she said. Nowhere's safe while he's breathing, Silas replied. We end this tonight. She looked back at the trembling girl, then at the gun in her own hand. The promise of vengeance burned inside her still, but it no longer had a single target. Silas watched her, his voice soft but steady. Maeve, when you face a man like Briggs, hate will keep you standing, but only love will keep you human. She didn't answer. Not yet. But something in her heart shifted, a slow, aching thaw. The girl reached for her hand. Maeve squeezed it gently. We'll get you home, she said. Silas nodded toward the ridge. Then we start with finding the road out. Maeve took one last look at the canyon behind them, the place where lies had been buried and reborn, As they walked into the night, she felt the truth following close, silent as their shadows. And somewhere ahead, under the fading thunder, Briggs waited, not just for blood, but for the moment their hearts would falter. The desert wind carried their fate forward into a dawn neither of them were ready to meet. Yet both could no longer escape. Dawn came slow over the desert, bruised and red at the edges, like the sky had been shot through. The light didn't feel clean yet. It carried the smoke of what the night had done. Maeve watched it rise over the canyon rim, one hand resting on the shoulder of the trembling girl who'd given her brother's name. Silas stood a few yards ahead, back turned, hat low. He looked carved from the same stone that lined the cliffs, steady, unmoved, impossible to read. When the wind lifted, it carried the faint scent of rain and gunpowder. Maeve could still taste both on her tongue. "You haven't said much," Silas said without turning. "What's left to say?" Her voice came quiet but sharp. "You told me Briggs was a lie. That you didn't kill Jonah. And now there's a girl saying her father died by your gun." Silas turned then. His eyes held the kind of pain that doesn't show in noise. "If I'd shot your brother, Maeve, I'd have buried him myself, and I'd carry the weight where you could see it." "You carry plenty," she said, nodding to the scar by his eye. "How do I know what it cost you?" He stepped closer, slow and careful, like a man approaching a frightened horse. "You don't," he said softly, "but you'll have to decide whether to judge me by the stories you've been told or by the man you've seen stand beside you." Maeve looked away first. The truth of that hurt worse than any lie. The girl, Elara, she'd said her name was, sat near the fire, knees drawn tight to her chest. The flames danced in her wide eyes. "He said you'd both come for me," she whispered. "Said you'd lead him to the gold." "What gold?" Maeve asked. Elara shook her head. "I don't know." "My pa—" She stopped, voice cracking. "He talked about a chest buried near the north fence. Said it was cursed money. Said no good would come from it." Silas's jaw tightened. Briggs always did chase other men's curses. Maeve frowned. "You think this is about money?" He looked into the fire. "No. Briggs doesn't care about gold. He cares about control. The money's just the bait he uses to draw the desperate close." The sun climbed higher, washing colour into the red rock. Silas packed his saddlebag with quiet precision, a man trained by years of leaving fast. Maeve helped the girl to her feet. Elara's legs trembled but held. "We'll ride for the ridge," Silas said. "If Briggs follows, we make our stand where the ground favours us." Maeve's eyes met his. "And if he doesn't?" "Then he's already ahead of us." They rode in silence for a long stretch. The desert spread wide and shimmering, a world that seemed both empty and alive. The horses' hooves beat a slow rhythm against the earth, a sound that belonged more to memory than to time. Maeve's thoughts tangled like tumbleweed. She'd spent years hunting a ghost, feeding her anger like a campfire she refused to let die. But now that the ghost had a face, one that looked at her without malice, the fire didn't know what to burn. "You ever get tired of running?" she asked suddenly. Silas didn't look back. "Running's not the hard part," he said. "Stopping is. You ever think about what it'd be like to stop?" He smiled faintly. "Every time I pass a place that looks like home, then I remember that men like me don't get homes, just horizons. She studied him for a long moment. Maybe you just haven't found the right fence to lean on. He laughed, soft and low. You always talk like you're half preacher, half gunslinger. Depends which side of me the world wakes up, she said. They crested the ridge just as the wind shifted. Silas raised a hand, halting her. The horses snorted, uneasy. Below them, dust stirred. Riders moving fast, 6 or 7 strong. Briggs. Silas dismounted, crouching low. He's found us sooner than I hoped. Maeve scanned the horizon. We can't outrun them with Elara. I don't plan to. He led the horses into a dry gulch choked with mesquite. The ground dipped enough to hide their silhouettes. The sun glared hard, throwing knives of light across the sand. We make them think we're still moving west, Silas said. Then double back through the ravine. There's an old water station near the ridge. Solid walls, 1 entrance. If we can hold there, we stand a chance. Maeve loaded her revolver, each click sounding louder than thunder. And if they find us first? Silas looked at her, eyes steady. Then we fight back to back. No doubts, no ghosts. She nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over her. For the first time since her brother's death, the rage inside her didn't feel wild. It felt focused. Elara clung to Maeve's sleeve. He'll kill you, she whispered. Maeve squeezed her hand. He'll try. They moved fast, keeping low. The desert heat rose around them, shimmering like the breath of some waiting beast. Every step felt like the space between 2 heartbeats, stretched, fragile, uncertain. When they reached the water station, Silas pushed open the warped door. The air inside smelled of dust and time. Broken barrels, an old stove, a cracked mirror on the wall. Maeve caught her reflection, wind-blown, sunburned, eyes bright with something fierce. The girl who had sworn revenge was still there, but another stood beside her now, one who had learned that hate could be heavy, and maybe love was just another kind of weapon. Silas barred the door. They'll be here before sundown. She met his gaze. Then we make the waiting count. He hesitated, then spoke low. Maeve, if I don't walk out of this, you will. But if I don't, she stepped closer, her hand resting on his chest, you don't get to die before I decide what to do with you. A slow smile tugged at his mouth. Fair enough. The air between them thickened, the kind that hums before a kiss or a storm. Her hand stayed where it was. She could feel the heartbeat under her palm. Strong, steady, too real to belong to a man she was supposed to hate. Outside, the wind rose again, carrying with it the echo of hooves. Silas glanced toward the door. They're close. Maeve drew her gun. Then let them come. He looked at her, something like pride flickering behind his calm. You're not the woman I met in that saloon. No, she said. I'm the woman you made dangerous. The first shot cracked in the distance, a sharp punctuation to the sunrise. And as dust lifted on the horizon, Maeve felt something new stir inside her. It wasn't fear. It wasn't rage. It was the quiet knowing that sometimes the only way to find peace is to walk straight through the fire. The sound of hooves grew louder, and the wind carried Briggs's laughter across the plain, a promise, a warning, and the beginning of the storm they could no longer outrun. The sun hung high and merciless above the water station, bleaching the world into silence. The wind had gone still. Even the earth seemed to wait for the first shot. Maeve stood by the narrow window slit, revolver steady in her hand. Dust shimmered on the horizon, a swarm of riders closing in, Briggs and his men. She could hear their laughter before she saw their faces. Silas checked his rifle, movement slow, deliberate. 7 of them, he said. 2 with repeaters, the rest just noise. Maeve's heart beat steady. Not calm, never calm, but focused. "You've fought worse." He gave a faint smile. "Once fought 12 Comancheros in a canyon half this wide. Lived long enough to regret it." "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No," he said, meeting her eyes. "Supposed to remind you that I don't die easy." In the corner, Elara huddled behind an overturned barrel, clutching a canteen like it was a prayer. Her eyes darted between them, the outlaw she'd been taught to fear and the woman who'd sworn to kill him. Outside, the first echo of hooves hit the hard pan. The ground itself trembled. "Maeve," Silas said quietly, "if they break the line, you take the girl and run south through the wash. Don't stop." She turned on him. "You think I'm leaving you to die?" "I think one of us ought to live long enough to tell the truth." She stepped closer, eyes bright. "No one's dying here today. Not you, not me, not her." His gaze softened for just a breath. "You've got your brother's fire." She didn't answer. Couldn't. Her throat felt tight. She'd spent years chasing that fire, and somehow this man had handed it back to her without meaning to. A rifle cracked outside. The window splintered. Elara screamed. Maeve dropped, rolled, and fired through the gap. 1, 2, 3 shots. A man fell from his horse, kicking up red dust. Silas's rifle thundered next. "That's 1 down," he muttered. 6 to go. The next minutes blurred into noise and heat. Gunfire echoed against the stone walls, bullets whining through cracks in the boards. The air smelled of smoke and metal. Silas moved like a man carved from purpose, calm, ruthless, efficient. Every time Maeve looked his way, the fear inside her steadied. Then the firing stopped. Silence again, heavier now. Briggs's voice floated across the distance, smooth and taunting. "Silas Hart, you always did love making bad company. You should have stayed gone when I let you." Silas leaned his rifle against the wall. "He's baiting us," he said quietly. Maeve's jaw clenched. "Let him," Briggs laughed. "I got something belongs to you, Hart. Little chest, north fence. Your old partner buried it there before he died. You want it, come get it. I'll even let the lady watch you try." Silas went still. Maeve saw something shift behind his eyes. A memory, heavy and unspoken. "What chest?" she asked. He hesitated. "A soldier's pay box. Belonged to Jonah." Her breath caught. "My brother?" He nodded once. "We found it the day he died. I tried to take it back to your ranch, but Briggs came first. Killed 2 of my men for it. Said it was proof the world owed him." Maeve stared at him, her pulse pounding. "And you never told me." "I wanted to," he said quietly. "But when I found you hunting me, I figured you wouldn't listen." "Maybe I would have." He gave a small, sad smile. You weren't ready to hear mercy back then. She looked down at her shaking hands. And now? You're still listening. Outside, Briggs's voice rose again. You've got 1 hour, Hart. Then I take the girl back, and maybe I leave what's left of your pretty friend for the coyotes. Silas's jaw tightened. He's bluffing. Maeve shook her head. No, men like him don't bluff. They break things until they stop screaming. Elara whimpered in the corner. Maeve crossed the room, knelt beside her. Hey, look at me. You're not going back to him, you hear? The girl nodded, tears streaking her dusty cheeks. He said I'd never be free. Maeve brushed the hair from her face. He was wrong. Silas watched them quietly, something unreadable in his expression. We could make a run for it, he said finally, through the south gully. If we ride hard, we might outrun the others. Maeve met his eyes. You think he won't follow? He will, Silas said. But maybe this ends where it began. Where's that? The north fence. Maeve felt the word sink deep. The place her brother died. The place she'd buried her promise. She stood slowly, holstering her revolver. Then we finish it there. Silas nodded. Suits me fine. They saddled the horses fast, every motion silent but sure. The air outside shimmered with heat. Somewhere behind the ridge, Briggs's men shouted, getting ready. Maeve helped Elara into the saddle, tying her reins to Silas's horse. Stay low, she said, and don't look back. The girl's voice trembled. Will you come? Maeve smiled, tired, fierce. I'll be right behind you. Silas swung into his saddle, rifle across his lap. He looked at Maeve for a long moment, something like gratitude hidden behind the grit. You sure about this? Sure as I've ever been, she said. And you? He gave a quiet laugh. I've been walking toward this end since the day Briggs first called me brother. They rode out from the water station as the sun began to drop, long shadows stretching behind them. Dust rose in their wake, a trail of ghosts chasing the living. The world was silent again, save for the beat of hooves and the slow rhythm of a promise neither of them had spoken aloud. Maeve glanced over at Silas. You think we make it out? He looked straight ahead. Doesn't matter. What matters is that we stop running. The desert wind caught her hair, pulled it across her face like a veil. She felt the truth of his words settle deep inside her, warm, heavy, terrifying. She'd sworn to kill him, sworn it like prayer. But somewhere between the thunder and the quiet, her oath had turned into something else, something that felt like mercy, something that felt like love, trying to be brave. And as the sun bled out behind the ridge, the two riders pressed on toward the north fence, where the past waited, and where the story would finally decide who was worth forgiving. The desert turned to gold as the sun began to fall, the light soft but restless, like the world itself was holding its breath. Maeve and Silas rode in silence, the girl between them, her small hands gripping the reins as though they were the only thing keeping her tethered to life. The closer they came to the north fence, the quieter the world grew. Even the wind held its song. The air was thick with memory, of blood spilled, oaths sworn, and truths too heavy for words. Silas slowed his horse near a stand of cottonwoods. We'll rest the horses here, he said. Briggs will ride through the night. He'll think we're ahead. That gives us a few hours." Maeve dismounted, boots sinking into the red dirt. Her gaze fell on the ridge ahead, the same one that watched her brother die, the same ridge where she had once sworn vengeance beneath a sky full of lightning. Elara slid down, trembling. "I don't want to see that place again," she whispered. Maeve wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Then don't look at it. Look at me." The girl's eyes were wide and scared, but she nodded. Maeve helped her settle beside the fire while Silas gathered dry brush and struck a spark. The flame took quick, bright, hungry. Its light caught on Silas's face, softening the hard lines, showing the man beneath the scars. "You knew, Jonah," Maeve said quietly, "better than I ever did." Silas's hand stilled. He was a good man. Didn't talk much, but when he did, folks listened. I was just a drifter with too many ghosts. He gave me work. Gave me a name that wasn't whispered with fear. She looked at him, surprised by the warmth in his voice. "He never mentioned you." "He wouldn't," Silas said. He thought talking about kindness made it smaller. Maeve stared into the fire. "And Briggs?" Silas's eyes darkened. "Briggs was the other side of me. The side Jonah tried to save. We rode together once. He was clever, charming, ruthless. The kind of man who made you forget what you were giving up until there was nothing left to lose. And you trusted him." "I did." His voice dropped low. "And it cost your brother his life." Maeve turned toward him, heart tightening. "Say what you mean." He met her gaze, the firelight flickering between them. Briggs was supposed to steal cattle, make it look like bandits. Jonah caught us. I tried to talk Briggs down. He shot before I could draw. When it was done, he said, "Let the world think it was you." And I let him walk away. Maeve's breath hitched. "You didn't stop him?" "I wasn't the man Jonah thought I was," Silas said. "But I'm trying to be the man he believed I could be." The words fell like stones into the quiet. Maeve felt something break open inside her. Not anger this time, but grief finally finding its voice. "I hated you," she said softly. "For so long, I built myself out of that hate. I didn't know what else to hold on to." Silas nodded slowly. "Sometimes hate's the only thing that keeps you alive long enough to learn what living means." Maeve's throat tightened. "And what does it mean?" He looked at her then, really looked. "Maybe it means finding someone who still sees light in you when you've forgotten it's there." The fire popped. Maeve felt its warmth rise through her like a tide. She didn't move closer, but she didn't move away. Elara had fallen asleep beside the flames, her breathing slow and even. The desert beyond was vast, quiet, painted silver by moonlight. Maeve broke the silence first. "What happens if we don't make it to sunrise?" Silas's hand brushed the dirt near hers, not touching, just close enough to feel the pull. "Then we go down doing something right." "You always this poetic before a gunfight?" He smiled faintly. "Only when there's someone worth saying it to." Her chest tightened again, not with pain, but with something softer, something dangerous. She wanted to say more, but the words tangled between her heart and her throat. Instead, she whispered, "You should rest." "I can't," he said. Not yet. Why? Because if I sleep, I'll dream of the man I used to be, and I'm afraid I'll wake up wanting to be him again. Maeve turned her eyes toward the horizon. You're not him anymore. Maybe not, he said. But that's the thing about ghosts. They don't need to breathe to follow you. She wanted to reach for him then, to offer something that wasn't forgiveness, but something close. But before she could move, a sound broke the stillness. Distant, faint, a single echo of hooves against rock. Silas froze. He's closer than I thought. Maeve stood, her hand on her revolver. The moon had risen high, pale and cold. Across the dark expanse, a faint glow flickered. Lantern light, weaving like a snake through the brush. "Briggs," Silas said. Maeve glanced at Elara, still sleeping. "We can't stay here." "No," he said, slinging his rifle over his shoulder, "but we can finish it." He turned to her, voice low but steady. "When the time comes, if you get the shot, don't hesitate. I won't." Maeve's fingers brushed the barrel of her revolver. "I've been waiting for that moment for years." Silas's eyes softened. "Then, let's make sure it's for the right reason." The wind rose again, carrying the scent of rain and memory. Maeve took one last look at the fire before kicking dirt over the flames. The night swallowed the light. They mounted their horses, the desert stretching wide and unforgiving before them. As they rode toward the ridge, Maeve felt the storm inside her, the one that had raged since Jonah's death, begin to turn. It wasn't anger now. It was clarity. She looked at Silas, his silhouette framed by the moon. "When this is done," she said, "what will you do?" He didn't look back. "Maybe stop running." "And me?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe start living." Maeve exhaled, slow and trembling. The wind carried their shadows across the sand like ghosts chasing dawn. Ahead, the north fence waited, a grave, a secret, and a reckoning written in the dust. And behind them, Briggs rode closer, carrying the past like a noose neither of them could ignore. The night was made of iron and breath. The stars hung sharp over the desert, watching as if they'd seen this story before, two souls riding toward a truth neither could escape. The north fence came into view just before dawn, its posts leaning half-buried in red earth. It was the place where everything had started, the place where blood met dust and promises turned to ghosts. Maeve dismounted first. Her boots sank deep into the soil, still remembering the rain that had fallen on the night her brother died. She crouched near the fence post marked with an old horseshoe, the one she'd carved his initials into years ago, when grief was fresh and vengeance was young. Silas watched her from a few paces away, silent as always. The rising wind caught the brim of his hat and tugged at his coat, but he didn't move to stop it. "Feels different," she said quietly. "It is," he answered. "The dead don't stay angry forever. Only the living do." Maeve brushed dust from the wood. "You think he forgave you?" Silas looked down at the ground between them. "Maybe. Maybe he just wants me to stop pretending I deserve to die for it." Before she could answer, Elara stirred on the horse behind them. "I remember this place," she said softly. "He brought me here once, said it was cursed, said he'd show me where evil started." Maeve's hand tightened on her revolver. "Briggs?" The girl nodded. He dug something here, said it would buy him a kingdom, but when he opened it, he screamed, said it was empty. Silas's eyes narrowed. It wasn't gold he was after, it was proof. Maeve frowned. Proof of what? Of who really shot Jonah Calder, he said. Briggs never cared about money. He wanted to rewrite what happened, turn my guilt into his crown. The wind carried the sound of horses then, distant but closing. Maeve turned toward the horizon. A line of riders appeared against the pale dawn, moving fast. Too late to run, Silas said. Maeve drew her gun. I'm done running anyway. They moved quick, pulling the horses behind a line of rocks. Silas checked his rifle one last time, his hands steady despite the weight in the air. Maeve crouched beside him, the barrel of her revolver gleaming dull in the half-light. Whatever happens, he said, keep the girls safe. She met his eyes, her voice low and fierce. Whatever happens, we end this together. The riders spread out, Briggs at the front, tall in the saddle, coat snapping in the wind. Even at a distance, Maeve could feel the rot in his smile. "Well," Briggs called out, voice smooth as whiskey and twice as dangerous. "Ain't this a reunion for the ages?" The widow-maker, the ranch girl, and the little ghost. "Step off that horse, Briggs," Silas said, rising from behind the rocks. "You and I have words long overdue." Briggs dismounted, hands open, grin wide. "Oh, I'll come down, old friend. I owe you a debt or two." He walked forward, boots crunching on the dry earth. His men fanned out behind him, rifles glinting in the early sun. Maeve stepped into view beside Silas. "You don't get to hide behind your men this time." Briggs' smile faltered for the first time. "You've got fire, girl, just like your brother. Shame he didn't know when to put it out." Her finger twitched on the trigger. Silas's hand brushed hers, a quiet anchor. Briggs saw it and laughed. Oh, how sweet. The lady's found herself a cause worth dying for. Silas took a step forward. "You talk too much." "Maybe. But I learned from the best." Briggs drew faster than she could blink. 2 guns, silver and cruel. The world broke open with noise. Maeve dropped, rolling into the dust. Silas fired, hit one of Briggs's men square in the chest. The rest scattered, returning fire in a storm of bullets and sand. Elara screamed, clutching the horse's reins as lead tore through the air. Maeve rose behind the fence post, fired twice, dropped another man. She could feel the old fear trying to crawl up her spine, but something steadier held it down. Silas was beside her now, reloading, moving like he'd done this dance 1,000 times. "Stay low," he said. She didn't answer, just kept firing. When the smoke cleared, only 3 riders still stood, Briggs among them. His hat was gone, his face streaked with blood and rage. He spat into the dust. "You think this changes anything, Hart? You think dying with her makes you right?" Silas stepped out from cover, rifle empty now, holster bare. "It makes me done." Briggs lifted his gun, but Maeve was faster. Her shot hit his shoulder, spinning him back. He fell to one knee, cursing. Silas walked toward him. Briggs looked up, laughing through the blood. "You still think she'll forgive you when she learns the truth?" Silas stopped. "What truth?" Briggs grinned. "You didn't miss that day, Hart. You pulled the trigger. You killed Jonah Calder. I just made sure the story fit." Maeve froze, the world tilting around her. "That's a lie," Silas said, voice raw. Briggs's grin widened. "Then why did you bury him?" Silas's breath caught, and in that small silence Maeve saw the truth land heavy behind his eyes. He had fired. He had tried to warn her brother, to stop Briggs, but he had fired. Maeve's hand trembled around the gun. The air between them burned. Briggs laughed again. "Go on, Maeve. Finish it. You came all this way for that, didn't you?" Silas turned toward her. "He's twisting it. I tried to stop him." Maeve's throat tightened. "You shot him?" "Yes," Silas whispered, "but I didn't mean to kill him." The silence after that felt endless. Then Maeve stepped closer, slow, deliberate, until she stood between the two men. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "You both buried him, but only one of you still carries him." She turned her gun toward Briggs. "And it's not him." The shot cracked through the dawn, final and clean. Briggs fell backward into the dust, eyes wide, smile gone. The echo drifted across the plains and vanished into the wind. Silas stood there, breathing hard, his face unreadable. "You didn't have to—" "I did," she said. "For him. For me." Elara sobbed quietly, covering her ears. Maeve walked toward Silas, the gun still warm in her hand. "You killed my brother," she said softly. He nodded once. "I did. You also saved me." He looked at her then, truly looked, as if seeing the impossible. "You should hate me." "I did," she whispered. "But hate can't build what I need now." He stepped closer, dust swirling around them. "And what's that?" "Peace." The wind rose, tugging at her hair, carrying the smoke away. She dropped the gun into the dirt between them. "I don't know how to forgive you," she said, "but I know I don't want to kill you any more." Silas closed his eyes, and for the first time in years his breath sounded like relief. The sun climbed over the ridge, washing the blood and shadow from the land. And though the fight was done, something deeper, something tender and dangerous, still waited in the quiet space between their hearts. The morning light spread wide and slow across the canyon, turning the red earth pale gold. The wind had gone soft again, carrying only silence and the smell of gunpowder fading into the past. Briggs lay still where he'd fallen. A dark stain spread beneath him, soaking into the dust. His men had either run or bled into the horizon. The war that had haunted Maeve's nights was finally over, but her chest felt heavier than victory should allow. Silas stood a few yards away, hat in his hand, eyes lowered. He wasn't watching Briggs. He was watching the ground between them, where Maeve's revolver lay half-buried in the sand. She could still hear the echo of that shot, the one that ended everything. It hadn't sounded like vengeance. It had sounded like something breaking free. Elara knelt near the fence post, small and quiet. She wasn't crying any more, just tracing her finger along the old wood as if to remind herself that she was still real. Maeve finally spoke. "I thought it would feel different, killing him." Silas lifted his eyes. "It never feels like you think it will." "He deserved it." "Yes," he said softly, "but that doesn't make it easier to carry." The wind tugged at her coat, whispering through the grass. The same wind that had carried her brother's last breath. The same wind that had pushed her across deserts chasing ghosts. She looked up at Silas. You told me you wanted to stop running. What now? He hesitated. I bury him, he said, nodding toward Briggs. Then I ride until I find a place where my name doesn't mean anything. Maeve studied him. His face was drawn, tired, but there was something else beneath the weariness. Peace, maybe, or the start of it. You could stay, she said quietly. He looked at her, startled. After what I did? You tried to stop him, she said. That's more than most men would have done. My brother wouldn't want another grave out here. He'd want the truth to live. Silas's jaw tightened. You forgive too easy. She gave a faint, sad smile. No, I forgive slow. But I forgive because I'm tired of waking up to the sound of hate in my own chest. He took a step closer, close enough that the wind could braid their shadows together on the sand. Maeve, if I stay, there's no going back to what I was. That's the point, she said. The man you were's already buried. For a long moment, neither spoke. The desert around them seemed to breathe again. The horses shifted, restless but calm. Elara's small voice broke the silence. What will happen to me? Maeve turned to her. You'll come with me to the ranch. You'll have a bed, food, and people who won't hurt you again. The girl's lip trembled. I don't know how to be anyone anymore. Maeve knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then we'll learn together. Silas watched them, something soft flickering behind the weathered lines of his face. You always were stronger than you thought, he said. Maeve looked back at him. You make it sound like you knew me longer than you did. Maybe I just recognize the kind of strength that's born from loss, he said. It's the only kind that lasts. She rose to her feet, walking toward him until she was close enough to see the dust in his lashes, the cut on his jaw from a bullet that had come too close. You're bleeding, she said. He glanced down, as if surprised to still feel pain. Nothing worth tending. She reached up anyway, dabbing at the wound with the corner of her sleeve. You should let someone take care of you for once. His breath caught, but he didn't move. And who'd that be? Maeve's voice dropped, almost a whisper. Maybe someone who's been chasing the same ghosts. For a heartbeat, neither of them breathed. The air between them shifted. Not hot, not hungry, but alive. Silas's hand lifted, hesitated, then found hers. His skin was rough, calloused, warm. You sure you know what you're doing? He asked. No, she said honestly. But for the first time, that doesn't scare me. The sun climbed higher, bright enough to turn everything new. For the first time in years, Maeve didn't flinch from the light. Behind them, the land that had known too much blood lay quiet. Ahead of them stretched the open road, long, uncertain, and full of the kind of silence that could finally heal. Elara climbed onto the smaller horse, waiting. Maeve turned to Silas one last time. Come back to the ranch, she said. Help me mend what's left. He looked past her to the horizon, then back again. If I come back, I won't leave again. Good, she said. I'm done with men who only ride one way. A slow smile touched his mouth, the first real one she'd seen. Then maybe there's a place for me after all. Maeve nodded toward the road. Let's find out. They mounted and began to ride, slow, easy, the dust curling behind them like smoke from a fire finally burning itself out. As the ranch came into view, the girl leaned against Maeve's side, whispering, "Does it ever stop hurting?" Maeve looked out at the hills, glowing gold in the morning light. "No," she said softly, "but one day it starts to matter less than the things worth living for." Silas rode beside her, silent, steady, a man finally free of his ghosts. And as the desert wind carried them home, the fire between them changed, no longer the blaze of anger, but the quiet warmth of something that might, in time, become love. The days that followed were slow, like the desert learning how to breathe again after a storm. Maeve had forgotten how quiet the ranch could be when it wasn't haunted by loss. The wind still moved through the grass, the gates still creaked in the night, but now there was no echo of hatred in those sounds, only the ordinary music of living. Elara slept in the old guest room. She had nightmares sometimes, soft cries that broke the stillness. But Maeve would go to her, sit on the edge of the bed, and hum the old tune her mother used to sing by the fire. It wasn't a lullaby of peace, but it was honest, and somehow that was enough. Silas worked the fences at dawn, repaired the corral boards by day, and fed the horses without needing to be asked. The men in town called him the Quiet One at Calder Ranch. Some said he was an outlaw hiding from his past. Others said he was a ghost who'd come back to settle an old promise. Maeve didn't correct any of them. Let the world wonder. At night they'd sit on the porch, the lamp throwing soft gold between them. The air carried the scent of dust and pine, and the world would go still enough to hear the coyotes far out beyond the ridge. "You ever think about leaving again?" she asked one evening, her voice low. Silas took a slow sip from his tin cup. "Every morning when the sun hits that road, but every time I find another reason to stay." Maeve smiled faintly. "You sure it's not guilt keeping you here?" He looked at her then, steady. "Guilt builds walls. What I feel now, it builds something else." Her breath caught. She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't need to. The truth was there in the quiet, warm and dangerous as the first spark of a campfire in the dark. They spoke little after that. Words were thin currency between them. What mattered lived in the space their silence made. Weeks passed. The fences held, the herds grew stronger, and Elara began to laugh again, a sound that startled Maeve the first time she heard it. It was light, pure, unafraid. One afternoon, Maeve found Silas standing by the north fence, staring out over the open land. She walked up beside him, boots crunching softly on the dry earth. "Still waiting for ghosts?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just thinking how easy it is to mistake silence for peace." "What's the difference?" "Peace doesn't hide from you," he said. "Silence does." She studied him. His hands were rough, his shirt rolled at the sleeves, the sun catching the silver at his temples. He looked older than the man she'd met, but lighter, somehow, as if the desert had finally stopped holding its breath through him. "You ever miss the road?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "But then I remember the road never missed me." Maeve looked at the horizon, endless and open. "I used to think freedom meant being alone. Now I think it's being seen and still being free." Silas turned toward her. "You feel seen now?" She met his eyes. "More than I ever have." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of rain from somewhere far off. Maeve tilted her head back, letting the first drop touch her cheek. The sky darkened, gentle and heavy. "You should get inside," Silas said. She smiled. "And miss the first rain in months. Not a chance." He laughed under his breath. The sound, small, honest, moved through her like music. As the rain began to fall, she stepped closer, the space between them narrowing until there was no more need for words. His hand brushed hers, tentative at first, then certain. Maeve didn't pull away. She looked up into his face, the rain running down between them. "If I told you I don't know what this is," she said, "would that make it less real?" "No," he said softly. "It'd make it true." He leaned down then, slow as the dawn, and their foreheads touched, a gesture more intimate than any kiss. The world went still around them, just the sound of rain on dust and the heartbeat of something new trying to live. When they finally stepped apart, Maeve's voice was barely a whisper. "You still think peace doesn't hide?" He smiled, rain glistening on his lashes. "Not when it's found you." That night, the storm rolled heavy across the plains. Thunder walked along the horizon, steady and deep. Inside, the fire crackled while the rain beat the roof. Elara slept curled up by the hearth, her hand still holding the little wooden horse Silas had carved for her. Maeve stood by the window, watching the rain run down the glass. Silas joined her quietly. "Tomorrow," he said, "the road will smell of new earth." She nodded. "And we'll still be here." He placed his hand lightly on her back. "If the road ever calls you again." She turned to face him. "It won't. The only thing calling me now is home." And for the first time in years, she said the word home without flinching. Outside, the storm softened to a whisper, and dawn waited behind the clouds. Not a promise of what was lost, but of what could still be found. The morning after the storm came bright and clean. The air was soft and new, the kind that made even the oldest wood on the porch smell alive again. The rain had washed the dust from the land, from the graves, from the fences, from their hearts. Maeve stepped outside barefoot, her hair still damp. The grass bent under the weight of dew, glinting like 1,000 small suns. She closed her eyes, breathing deep, letting the scent of wet sage and earth settle in her chest. For the first time in years, her lungs didn't ache with memory. Behind her, Silas's boots sounded on the porch boards. He stood there for a moment, saying nothing, just watching her. She turned, sunlight catching the edge of his smile, small, cautious, real. "You look like someone seeing the world for the first time," he said. "Maybe I am," she answered. "Maybe this is what forgiveness looks like." He nodded slowly. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" Maeve smiled. "Like something too gentle to trust." He stepped closer, holding a mug of coffee between his hands. "You'll learn." She took it from him, their fingers brushing. "So will you." They sat on the steps together, the horizon still damp with morning light. The ranch stretched quiet before them, horses grazing, a new fence shining pale against the hill. Somewhere inside, Elara was humming, a sound as light as wind through wheat. Maeve glanced toward the north fence, now nothing more than a line of wood and shadow. "I buried the last of him out there yesterday," she said softly. The hate, the grief. Jonah's name already knows peace. Silas looked down at his hands. And what about mine? She reached out, laying her palm over his. Yours still needs time, but you don't have to carry it alone. His eyes met hers, quiet, steady, unguarded. You really mean to keep me here, don't you? I mean to let you choose to stay, she said. That's different. He smiled then, the kind of smile that comes after too many storms, the kind that doesn't ask for more, only accepts what's finally true. Then I choose to stay. The words hung there, simple as a sunrise, sure as the sound of a heart that's done running. Maeve leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. The warmth between them was not fire anymore. It was something slower, deeper, the steady heat of trust finding its place. They stayed that way for a long while, watching the sky turn from gold to blue. When Elara came running out, barefoot and laughing, Maeve caught her mid-step and spun her once through the air. The girl's laughter filled the open morning, chasing away every shadow left in the corners. Silas watched them, that faint smile still on his face. She's healing, he said. Maeve nodded. We all are. The sound of a meadowlark broke the quiet. A train whistle answered somewhere far off, the world moving again, gentle and unhurried. Silas rose, brushing the dust from his coat. You think this peace will last? Maeve looked out toward the mountains, where the mist was lifting. Peace isn't meant to last, she said. It's meant to be felt, then shared. He stepped behind her, close enough for his shadow to touch hers. Then we'll share it. She turned, eyes soft. With every sunrise. They stood there in silence, two souls who had walked through hell and somehow found a way to make heaven out of dust. The storm had taken everything that wasn't real and left behind only what was. The wind moved again, warm and clean, wrapping around them like a quiet promise. Maeve reached for his hand. You know, she whispered, I used to think every Western story had to end with someone dying. Silas's smile deepened. Maybe the best ones end with someone learning how to live. She nodded, her eyes bright in the morning light. Then let's make this one of those. And as the sun climbed higher, painting the desert gold, they walked back toward the house, toward coffee and laughter and the slow, steady work of mending what was broken. The land was still wild, the sky still wide, but in the quiet between them, the West had finally found its peace. If this story has touched a tender place in your heart, let your light stay with us. Comment, share, and subscribe, so this Western fire keeps burning for you.